What is the debt ceiling, and why is there a standoff? The United States is currently in a precarious position as it approaches a fiscal cliff. In January 2023, the Treasury Department issued a warning that the government had reached its borrowing limit, or debt ceiling. As a result, the Treasury has been employing extraordinary measures to guarantee the government's ability to meet its financial obligations. These will only last the US government until June 1st. The situation is rapidly becoming critical. The debt limit must be raised before that date, or the US government will face an unprecedented default on its debts. In a letter to Congress earlier this year, the US Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, warned that failing to meet the government's financial obligations would have catastrophic effects on the American economy, the livelihoods of its citizens, and global financial stability. What is the debt ceiling? The debt ceiling defines the maximum amount of money that the U.S. government is permitted to borrow to finance its services, such as Medicare, Social Security, and military expenditure. Every year, the government generates revenue through taxes and other channels, like customs fees, but consistently spends more than it takes in, leading to a deficit that has doubled over the past decade. This deficit is added to the nation's total debt at the end of each year. The U.S. Treasury issues securities, such as government bonds, to secure loans, which it will later repay with interest. When the government hits its debt limit, however, the Treasury is unable to release more securities, effectively ceasing a vital source of funding for the federal government. Congress is responsible for establishing the debt limit, which is currently set at $31.4 trillion. Since 1960, the debt ceiling has been raised 78 times by both Democratic and Republican presidents. At times, the ceiling has been briefly suspended and then reinstated at a higher level, effectively raising the debt limit retroactively. What accounts for the majority of federal government spending? There are generally three broad categories into which federal government spending in the United States can be classified: mandatory spending, discretionary spending, and interest payments on government debt. The top two contributors are Social Security and health, which are part of mandatory spending. These account for nearly half of the total annual budget. Discretionary spending, on the other hand, includes military spending, which is the largest portion and amounts to 12% of the budget. Education, employment training and services, and benefits for U.S. veterans are other significant expenditures. What are the reasons behind the high level of U.S. debt? The U.S. national debt is attributed to either increased government spending or reduced revenue. The U.S. has had some level of debt throughout its history, but the debt significantly increased in the 1980s following Ronald Reagan's extensive tax cuts. As a result of reduced tax revenue, the government had to borrow more money to meet its expenditures. In the 1990s, the end of the Cold War led to a decrease in defense spending, and a thriving economy resulted in higher tax revenues. However, the early 2000s saw the collapse of the dot-com bubble, which led to an economic downturn. Additionally, George W. Bush implemented two tax cuts in 2001 and 2003. The subsequent military campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan contributed to an increase in spending that totaled almost $6 trillion throughout the course of the war. During the 2008 Great Recession, the U.S. government had to increase spending to rescue banks and expand social services, as the unemployment rate soared to 10%. Following the recession, in 2017, the unemployment rate returned to its pre-recession levels, and Donald Trump passed a significant tax cut. The national debt increased by $7.8 trillion during his time in office. Subsequently, the COVID-19 pandemic struck, and the U.S. government responded by passing several stimulus bills aimed at mitigating the pandemic's severe effects. The total amount of these bills reached $5 trillion. Former President Donald Trump recently said that a default would be preferable to a result that doesn't stop the government from spending money like drunken sailors. Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan Chase, strongly criticized Trump, stating that he lacks an understanding of the debt ceiling and its potential consequences. Here's an excerpt from his interview on Bloomberg Television.
How worried are you about the debt ceiling? So Donald Trump yesterday in a town hall with CNN, A, did not seem too worried, and 2, actually told Republicans to stick to their guns.
Well, one more thing he doesn't know very much about. Let me put it in 2 categories. One is actual default. That is potentially catastrophic. And you can go through a million ways, but anyone knows that's potentially catastrophic. And I don't think it's going to happen because it gets catastrophic. And the closer you get to it, you will have panic. And so the closer you get, you have markets get volatile, maybe the stock market go down, the treasury markets will have their own problems. It's amazing you already have certain T-bills trading at 3% and right next to them 5%. This is not good. And people should remember the American financial system is the foundation to the global economic system. And the closer we get, more panic. We might get downgraded. The last time we were downgraded, we had like 65 or 70% debt to GDP. Now it's 105. Now our deficits are 2 or 3 times that we had back then. So, we better be very careful. And I wish we didn't get there at all. I'm respectful of both sides. Who, one side wants to use it to make up for what got jammed down their throats, and I would love to get rid of the debt ceiling thing, but please negotiate a deal.
What are the consequences of a debt default? The repercussions of a U.S. default remain unclear since it has never occurred before, but the outlook is not promising. In August 2011, the United States came perilously close to reaching its debt ceiling without an increase or suspension. A deal was only struck on the day the government was scheduled to run out of funds, risking a potentially unprecedented default. This highly unusual political standoff resulted in the S&P 500 falling by 15% and a spike in short-term Treasury yields and credit spreads. These events occurred in the context of an already slowing economy and uncertainty surrounding the Eurozone crisis. As a result, S&P Global Ratings downgraded the U.S. AAA debt rating, and the Budget Control Act was implemented to significantly reduce the fiscal deficit. If the United States were to default on its debt, it could have severe economic consequences both domestically and globally. Some potential outcomes include increased borrowing costs. If the U.S. defaults on its debt, it would become more expensive for the government to borrow money in the future. This could lead to higher interest rates on U.S. Treasury bonds, which would in turn affect other borrowing costs throughout the economy. Financial market turmoil. A default on U.S. debt could cause significant turmoil in financial markets around the world. Investors may lose confidence in U.S. Treasuries as a safe investment, which could lead to a sell-off of U.S. bonds and a sharp decline in their value. Weakening of the U.S. dollar. The U.S. dollar is currently the world's reserve currency, which means that many countries hold U.S. dollars as a store of value. A default on U.S. debt could lead to the loss of investor confidence in the U.S. dollar, which would in turn result in the rapid weakening of the economy, triggering widespread job losses. The federal government would be unable to provide all of its services due to a lack of resources. Economic recession. A default on U.S. debt could also trigger an economic recession in the U.S. and potentially around the world. As borrowing costs increase, businesses may find it more difficult to obtain financing, which could lead to a decrease in investment and hiring. Loss of confidence in the U.S. government. A default on U.S. debt could also lead to a loss of confidence in the U.S. government's ability to manage its finances. This could have long-term implications for the country's reputation and standing in the global economy. What are the obstacles to raising the debt ceiling? While political standoffs are not uncommon, the current prolonged dispute is due to the fact that Republicans control the lower chamber, that is, the House of Representatives, while the Democrats hold the majority in the 100-member Senate. This political divide has had a significant impact on both parties' ability to pass significant legislation through Congress. Congress is facing challenges in raising the debt ceiling due to disagreements between Republicans and Democrats over spending cuts. Republicans passed a bill in the House on the 26th of April, proposing a $1.5 trillion increase in the debt ceiling, but also requiring $4.8 trillion in spending cuts over 10 years. Democrats have refused to negotiate spending cuts in conjunction with the debt ceiling. Republicans appear determined to use the impending deadline of default as leverage to push Democrats into accepting spending cuts. This tactic proved successful in 2011 when Democrats agreed to spending cuts 72 hours before the government defaulted. With both sides unwilling to compromise, a continued impasse could lead the U.S. economy closer to disaster. How is the standoff impacting the financial market? Moody's has warned that if the standoff between Democrats and Republicans continues, stock prices could drop by nearly 20%, and the U.S. economy could contract by over 4%. Paying attention to such macroeconomic events is important for swing traders, as these will dictate the market in the short and medium terms. In fact, yields on shorter-term Treasury bills, such as one-month Treasuries, incorporate some caution, whereas longer-term Treasury yields reflect the anticipation that any debt concerns will be resolved promptly. The VIX, a measure of the stock market's volatility, does not display evidence of market jitters just yet, but things could change rapidly in the next few days or weeks. Thanks for watching. We hope that you found this video helpful, and if you feel we've earned it, consider hitting the like button and subscribing to our channel. At Swing Traders Daily, we believe that every swing trader should be aware of important events affecting the economy and the financial market as a whole. See you soon for another video.